Ooh, take a look at these two guys. This guy has white skin. Just like me, I have white skin. That guy has brown skin. Okay, now these two guys are looking for a job. They're both unemployed and they're trying to find a job. Now, which person do you think is going to get a job first? Who's going to find a job first? What do you think? Well, you may have heard of a term, white privilege. Have you ever heard of this term before, white privilege? Privilege means to have an advantage. You're in a position of advantage, right? So white privilege means that white people have some advantage over other people. Okay, and people with different skin colors are somehow at a disadvantage. A disadvantage, okay? So have you heard this before? White privilege. Now, take a look at these two people, okay? They both have white skin. He's a man, she's a woman, and they're both applying for a job. Now, who do you think is going to get the job? What do you think? Well, there's another term in English called male privilege. Male privilege. That means men are somehow more in a position of advantage over women. Women are disadvantaged. Okay, what do you think about this? Now, these terms, male privilege and white privilege, are actually very common today. I think you will hear these words, especially if you browse the internet, if you browsing English news or on social media, you're going to see these terms, white privilege and male privilege. Now, a lot of my viewers here on YouTube, a lot of my subscribers are immigrants, either living in Canada or they are outside of Canada and they want to immigrate to Canada. Okay, so a question you might have is, if I come to Canada, will I be disadvantaged in some way? Will I be disadvantaged? Okay, half my viewers are women, almost half. I think 47% of my viewers are women, which I'm really happy about, because when I started my channel, there were like 80% of my viewers were men, or maybe more, like 90%. But now it's pretty even. It's about 47% women, 53% men. Okay, now I'm guessing if you're watching this, you are, an immigrant. You probably don't have white skin, right? I'm white and you're probably not white. So you might be thinking, if I come to Canada, will I be disadvantaged in some way based on my skin color? Well, I have good news. Okay, in my experience, white privilege does not exist in Canada. I know there are people who might disagree with me on this, but in my experience, white privilege does not exist in Canada. And in my experience, male privilege does not exist in Canada. Okay, so that's great news for you if you're coming from another country. If you're a woman, coming from another country where you might not have very many opportunities in your country, hey, you're going to have good opportunities here. Maybe if you're worried about your skin color, I don't think you need to worry about that. In my experience, this does not exist. Now, I have a friend who is always telling me about different statistics. She believes that male privilege is a thing, it's true, and white privilege is true. Okay, she's always telling me different statistics. Well, you know what, to be honest, most of the time I don't believe statistics. Okay, a lot of times statistics can be wrong. But the other thing is that statistics are not people. Statistics aren't people. Every person has a unique story. Everyone has their own story, their own experience, right? So you can't fit experience and statistics together sometimes. Sometimes they don't fit together, okay? So that's why I say in my experience. Okay, because experience is very powerful. It's so powerful. Okay, take a look at these two people. Okay, let's say she is an immigrant woman and he's a white man, and they both apply for a job. Okay, and she knows she is more qualified than he is. But let's say he gets the job. She doesn't get the job. Well, then she's going to believe that, male privilege exists, or maybe white privilege exists, right? Because that's her experience, right? It doesn't matter what the statistics say. It's her experience, okay? Now, that's why I say in my experience. Now, I want to tell you, in my experience, actually, the opposite is true. The opposite is true. In my experience, okay, from my perspective, it is a disadvantage to have white skin in Canada, and it's maybe a little bit of a disadvantage to be a male. Can you believe that? How is that possible? That means I'm a disadvantaged because I have white skin and I'm a male in Canada. Am I disadvantaged? Well, in my experience, yeah, I am disadvantaged. Okay, now I want to tell you a story. Okay, so after high school, I went to college here in Calgary, and I studied a diploma in financial services. Okay, a diploma is 2 years of study. Okay, so I have a diploma in financial services. My desire was to work in a bank. I wanted to work in a bank, any position in a bank. I loved the atmosphere in a bank. I wanted to sort of wear a nice shirt. I wanted to, I wanted to serve customers, be just really helpful to people with money. And I love the idea of working in a bank. So after I graduated, I applied to a lot of banks and nobody hired me. Okay, I barely got any interviews. Okay, I applied to banks and other financial companies like insurance companies and those kinds of things. And I didn't get a job. And it was crazy because a lot of my classmates, when I was studying this diploma, a lot of my classmates were immigrants, right, from other countries and stuff. And they weren't white. They didn't have white skin. A lot of them were getting jobs in banks and other companies. And I thought, what's wrong? Is it something wrong with my resume? Is there something wrong with me? I couldn't figure it out. Okay. I was really depressed. I just wanted to get a job so bad, but I couldn't get a job. I applied to so many companies. I didn't get a job. Okay. Now, why did that happen? Why is that? Well, I think it's because minority rights in Canada is a huge thing. Canada defends minority rights, and especially under Justin Trudeau's leadership, it's always been, Canada's always been a place that protects minorities and puts minorities up here. Okay, but especially under Justin Trudeau's leadership, he's always talking about diversity and different cultures and stuff like that. So minorities are a huge deal in Canada, and sometimes the majority can be forgotten, or sometimes the minority is here, gets put here, and the majority is down here. Okay, now companies are terrified of not having diversity. Okay, so this culture of minority and diversity is so strong in Canada that companies are terrified. Terrified means very scared, very afraid. Okay, companies are terrified of not having diversity. That's true. Okay, so take a look at these two pictures. This is me, right? And that woman is from the Middle East. Okay. Now let's say both of us apply to a bank. We both apply for a job in a bank. Okay. Now, who is going to get the job? In your opinion, who is going to get the job? Well, I think, based on my experience, she has a higher chance of getting the job than me, even if I am more qualified, right? I might speak better English than she does. I might be more educated than she is. I might have more experience than she does. But in my experience, I think she has a higher chance of getting a job in a bank here in Canada. So that's great news for you. If you're coming from another country, I think you could have a very good chance at getting a job in Canada. Companies are terrified of being accused. Accused. You're not diverse. Oh, that you're a bad company. You don't have any diversity. Right? Companies are actually very afraid. There is a culture of fear in Canada, in Canadian companies. They are afraid of being accused of not being diverse enough. Okay, so I think she has a higher percentage or higher chance of getting the job than me. That's based on my experience. Okay, and I think it's because she is wearing a head covering. Okay, and she has brown skin. Now, a lot of people in Canada, some people are racist in Canada. They don't like that. They might say, get out of our country. Okay. Unfortunately, there are people in Canada like that who don't like other cultures, other religions, other, people, right? But I think she would have a higher chance of getting a job in a bank because she has a head covering, and the people that, the managers of the bank, they know they want to be perceived as being diverse. They want people to look at them and think they are inclusive. Do you know what inclusive means? Inclusive means we welcome people from everywhere. Okay, so because banks are so driven by this idea that, I think they would give her the job first. Now, every industry is probably a little bit different, right? There are different industries. There's the oil and gas industry. There's the banking industry. There's food industry, the food industry, restaurant industry. Okay, every industry is different, but I think particularly with the banking industry, she has a higher chance. Now, I live in North Calgary. Okay, I live in North Calgary. I've gone to lots of banks here in North Calgary, and in my experience, there aren't very many white people working in banks. It's very rare. There are very few white people working in banks in North Calgary. Why? I mean, white people live in North Calgary, but I don't know. I don't know why. If you live in Calgary, tell me, have you noticed the same thing? Why do you think that's happening? Why are there all these, different people working in banks and no white people? There's no white people working in banks. I don't know why. That's crazy. It's crazy. But if you come to Canada, to Calgary, I don't know about other cities. I haven't done banking in Toronto or Vancouver. I think Vancouver is the same pretty much as Calgary. But I want to know if you live in Canada, let me know. Is this true in your experience? Or do you go to a bank and there's just all white people? That would be crazy. Okay. Now, I want to talk about something. Let's say a bank has 5 people who look like her. Now, is that diverse? Is this diversity? Diversity means, a lot of people from different cultures and backgrounds. Is this diverse? No, it's not diverse at all. But nobody is going to say anything about this. Nobody's going to say anything. But if there were 5 of me working in a bank here in Canada, I think there would be a much higher chance that people would say, that's not diverse. That is bad. They're not being inclusive of people. That's not diverse, right? So I think there is some inconsistency in Canada right now. I think it's pretty bad, actually. So white privilege and male privilege, I don't believe they exist in Canada, but they exist in other parts of the world. Absolutely, they exist in other parts of the world. In some countries, women don't have basic rights. And in some countries, people might be discriminated against based on their skin color. If their skin is dark, they might be discriminated against. Maybe if their skin is light, they might be discriminated against, right? Every country is a bit different. But I know that these exist in other places. Now, I know what white privilege is because I have experienced it. I used to be an English teacher in China, right? So when I was in China, I got treated very well in different situations, okay? I got treated much better than the Chinese teachers, the local teachers, right? They had to work so hard, long hours. I got more money. I got more perks. Perks means benefits, right? I just got treated better in many situations, right? So I know what white privilege is, unfortunately, right? So, when I lived there and worked there, I felt really bad for the Chinese teachers because they worked so hard and yet I got more money, right? So I know what it's like to be treated better based on my skin color. Okay, so white privilege exists, but I don't think it exists in Canada. Okay, now male privilege also exists around the world, right? When I was in China as well, sometimes it was crazy. Okay, I worked at a few different places and I also applied at different schools and I talked to different people. Several times, schools told me they wanted to hire me because they were looking for a white male teacher. Can you believe it? They said, we want a white male teacher. If a Canadian company said that, if any company in Canada said, we want a white male employee, that would be insane. That company would get attacked. That company would get so much hatred, right? In Canada, you're not allowed to say those kinds of things. If you are an employer in Canada, you should know this. You're not allowed to ask someone's race, their religion, their skin color, their age. You're not even allowed to ask their age. How old are you? If you ask that in a job interview, they could sue you. You're going to be in big, big trouble. So it was funny for me working in China because those people, they were just honest. They said, we want a white male teacher. Okay. It's sort of funny because, Western countries always accuse China of not allowing free speech. Oh, China's bad. China doesn't allow free speech. Well, actually, in a lot of ways, maybe China has more free speech than Canada because you can't say those things in Canada. If you say those kinds of things in Canada, you're going to get into big problems. So actually, there's a little bit of a culture of fear in Canada where people are afraid to speak their minds because they're going to get attacked. They're going to get attacked by these, we call them social justice warriors. Have you heard that term before? A social justice warrior is like a social police. Social police. Oh, you're bad. If you say one idea, you're going to get attacked on social media, Facebook, Twitter, those things. Okay. So Canada is known for its equality, right? Canada is a great place of equality. That's why everyone wants to come to Canada, because in Canada, people get treated equally based on their gender. If you're a woman coming to Canada, you have a great chance to succeed, or your religion or your race or your age, different things. So Canada tries to be based on equality. That's one of Canada's values. Okay. Now, there is a politician in Canada named Maxime Bernier. Have you ever heard of this guy before? Maxime Bernier. Now, he has accused Justin Trudeau of extreme multiculturalism and cult of diversity. Okay, he's used these terms to describe the Canadian, Canada as a country under his leadership, under Justin Trudeau's leadership. Extreme multiculturalism. You know, Justin Trudeau is always talking about other cultures, other peoples, minorities. He's always talking about other people and a cult of diversity, right? Diversity is a good thing, but the word cult is bad. Cult means a bad religion. It's like just a crazy religion. So he's saying that Justin Trudeau is sort of promoting a cult of diversity where it's gone crazy. It's gone crazy. It's like a cult. Okay. So he says we should celebrate Canadian values instead of other cultures' values. Okay. We should celebrate Canadian values like equality between men and women. Instead of celebrating like all these other countries' values, we should uphold Canadian values first. Now, I think you're going to see a lot more of him in the future. Now, something big has happened recently in Canadian politics. I won't talk about it now. I'll make another lesson on it. But it's pretty big. It's very interesting. So I think you're going to see much more of this guy in the news in the future. His name is Maxime Bernier. He is from Quebec, from the province of Quebec. So he speaks French as his mother tongue, but he also speaks English. Interesting guy. I'll make another lesson soon about him and his ideas. But hey, I want to know, do you think white privilege and male privilege exist in Canada? In your experience, do they exist? Let me know down there in the comments, and I'll see you over in the next episode of Mad English TV. Take care.